printer and a wallpaper person. It's almost $10,000 cheaper than what. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. If you don't mind, please take a seat so we get the meeting going. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce? I'm Len Casson. I have to be your president at this point. We'd like to get this meeting going. Tonight is going to be an only informational meeting in reference to the bylaws that we are going to talk about tonight. We have a committee that was set up. We have lawyers. We have people that are on board, and they will express to you what the bylaws are. They'll talk to you about why we have them. If anybody has any questions only on the bylaws tonight, then please present them. They will be glad to answer anything that we have for you to know about. Okay? We do not and will not deviate from anything other than the bylaws tonight. So please give it a few minutes. Let me introduce people so you know who they are. You want to do it? Okay. Rick Schwartz, he'll introduce the people on the panel.
Okay, this is the bylaws. Okay, I'd like to introduce you to the Bylaw Committee. We have close? Okay. Can you hear now? Okay. Okay. Bob Berman, Bob Wazell, Bob Groman.
Check 1, 2.
Bob Groman, Larry Silva, Otto Del Prado. We started to revise the bylaws this year because there were amount. We've made other changes. One of the major changes we made in consultation with the Board of Managers is to extend the minimum lease requirement to 1 year. That was asked for, that's put in the changes. Bob is going to explain some of the salient points that we've gone through, and then anybody can ask any questions that we want. We operate under these bylaws. These are all our rules. This is what our whole operation is based on.
Hi, good evening. As Rick said, we started out by trying to eliminate all the extraneous text that deals with the sponsor and probably cut out 3 or 4 pages of the bylaws. While doing that, we noticed there were other items that probably needed attention. So we then modified other pieces of the bylaws. One of the modifications dealt with the Architectural Review Committee, just to make sure that it was clear what their role was. There were some thoughts that when the board appoints if there's a vacancy on the board and the board makes an appointment, how long should that appointment last? Under the current bylaws, it lasts to the end of the term of the person who's vacated. Under the new rules, most of the time it'll just last till the next election, and there'll be another election. There's a new provision that requires 2 open meetings a year by the board. The other pieces were done to try and strengthen the power of the board and to clarify the board's authority. For example, there's now a provision in there that bars open houses. Prior to this, we used the provision that said that you can't create a nuisance in order to prevent a big flow on open houses. We're not sure that would have worked. There are clarifications on the board's ability to make rules and regulations and the enforcement of those rules and regulations. We always hear complaints that, why doesn't the board enforce things? Well, they've got to have the power to do it, and these bylaws add some provisions giving them that power. Those would be the more important changes, and obviously there's enough people here that probably have questions, so I will turn this back to Rick and open it up to the floor.
Okay, does anybody have any questions they would like to ask? And Matt will come around and bring you the mic. Any questions, period? Wait. Where's Matt? You need to talk into the mic so the people who are streaming this can hear.
Thank you. I applaud the board and the committee for what they did in trying to simplify many of the things in the bylaws. However, one of the items which Bob Roman did not discuss was what's called check signing. It's in Article 11, number 7. And basically what it says, that any check over $100,000 needs to be signed by 2 members of the board. And not only checks, but any financial instrument can be signed by 2 board members if it's over $100,000. What happens if you have a $90,000 check? Only 1 board member needs to sign that. To me, that is really diluting the fiduciary responsibilities of the board. This may...
Note, please, that the current bylaws have no limits on that at all. The $100,000 cap is new, and no one's going to sign those checks without the board's authorization.
Well,
so I hear what you're
no,
saying.
let me continue. I'm not finished.
Okay.
Currently, I'm sure you have a lot of confidence in the board members. However, how about the future? You may have members of the board who might have situations, personal situations, in which there may be some fraud. So I don't understand why you can't continue the 2-signature requirement for any check issued by the HOA.
The answer is you probably could, but it's not very practical because all of the checks that go through, there are numerous checks, and the 1 signature is probably okay. And to cover your other point, the board is insured. There is insurance on all board members, fidelity insurance, that in the event of any board member stealing funds improperly, the insurance will cover it.
Why take the chance? You have 7 members on the board. Why not have 2 signatures? I truly do not understand.
In reality...
Let me just finish. Okay? Why do you have to have only 1 signature? From what I understand, you're required now to have 2 signatures on checks. The way this is changed in the bylaws basically is only changing the president, and it says the president and the treasurer. That's what it's crossed out. So currently, you require 2 checks, two signatures. I do not understand why we as a community want to take that risk of possibly having some fraud of any kind. You read all the time people taking advantage of their situation and position.
Just tell him we heard his position.
Okay, we've heard your position. Thank you very much. In reality, as treasurer, I have never signed a check. That this has been delegated to TCM, they're our managing agent. They sign the checks. I might approve the bills for payment. I have never signed a check. So the board does not sign any checks. Carol.
No, you can't. People at home can't hear you, regardless of how loud you are.
In going along with this, if you have a $100,000 job and you give them a deposit of, let's say, $40,000 and then a check for $60,000, that would not require two signatures?
No, because you're issuing two separate checks.
So you can get around, this is meaningless then? In accordance with what Marvin said, I could get around this. I give two separate checks, and then I never have to have two people sign a check.
This is sort of like two-step verification. Many of us have two-step verification for our portfolios, for our bank accounts. So it's my feeling that essentially we have a two-step verification here. Number one, we have insurance. That's one step. And the second step is the fact that there's oversight from the board. I'm not a member of the board, but however, expenditures that are that large are probably discussed amongst the board members before an authorization is done for a commitment to spend that amount of money. So if we're talking about fraud, I think there's triple verification in terms of other members of the board who know what's going on.
In addition, every bill has to be approved by the property manager first. Then it comes to the board for approval, and then the check is cut. So that's an additional step of verification. If the property manager doesn't sign off on the bill, it doesn't go anywhere to begin with.
Yeah, let's switch gears for just a second. I want to congratulate you on the changes that you put in for the HOA bylaws. It's great. We're finally where we should be. And I'm particularly happy to see the addition to Article 7, Section 7, subsection G, which you've mentioned. Well, but you should know what it is, because he hinted at it, and it's a very important change. And if I understood you correctly, it's that in a fiscal year, you're now going to have at least 2 regularly scheduled board meetings open to the residents, to the owners to sit in on. I think that's wonderful. It's the first time that's ever happened here, and everybody should feel very good about that. Second quick question is, I'm assuming that this meeting also represents boards of managers' changes to their bylaws. And if that's correct, I'd like to know what would be a good reason why I would want to vote for any of those if they don't also include open meetings at least twice a year.
Well, as far as the HOA goes and the open meeting policy, which we put in effect in this new set of bylaws, it was in the interests of transparency. My wife and I have been residents of Meadowbrook Point for about 1.5 years, and what I heard was there was a lack of transparency with the board, that meeting notes could not be revealed on the advice of counsel. That's not part of this discussion. However, it has to do with transparency. So we pushed for open meetings as an essential tool to allow the members to ask questions and to know what's going on and to increase visibility. So that's what we did. The second part I can't. About
the Board of Managers, we had nothing to do with the Board of Managers bylaws. This was an HOA bylaw. You'd have to ask your board.
Good reason why we wouldn't look for precisely the same thing from the boards of managers that you become so generous on behalf of the HOA.
You'd have to ask your Board of Managers. I can't give that answer.
So this meeting is not representing their bylaw changes at all?
Correct. This is the HOA bylaws.
Okay.
Okay, Roger is one of the board of managers, and he will talk.
I think you said in the beginning, this is for both condo, and so it's not just for HOA. The 7 board of managers met, and we discussed these bylaws changes. We thought, for the most part, it's, like they said, it's sponsor eliminations, and the major thing we put in was the leasing. If there are other suggestions that are made, I think, Tom, you just suggested having meetings twice a year. I'm amenable to it. Board of managers here, raise your hands. Anybody? There you go. Presidents, 2 presidents over there, 1 over here. Okay, it seemed like it's, for those who are present, it represents a good idea. So we'll incorporate it. 2 a year, good idea.
Thank you.
Hi, Bob McDermott, 448 Pacing. Rick, the 2 extra meetings, are those in addition to the budget, to the voting meeting as well as the audited meeting?
Yeah.
Does that
Yes.
mean- so there'll be 2, so we'll have 4 a year versus the 1 we have now?
Correct. We actually have 2 now.
We have 2, because
Right.
when we get the audited financials,
Right.
we'll have a meeting on them. And the second thing I just wanted to mention on the insurance question, you have to catch the person before you can use the insurance. So, but I would think, so right now you're saying, you guys all review and approve the invoices, but it's only TCM that signs the check.
Right, TCM cuts the checks and signs the checks. He's been delegated. But there's 2 signatures before it gets to him.
2 approval signatures?
There are 2 approvals on our end before it even gets to him.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Raise your hand if you have a
There's
question.
another question.
Any questions?
I forgot one other thing. Is there any thought to us going to a calendar year compared to a fiscal year, making that transition?
We had not discussed that.
Is
It's something the finance committee could discuss.
Okay.
I have a very simple request. Would any of the board mind going over the criteria for passing this now?
In order for the bylaws to pass, we're required to get 2/3 of all residents to vote in favor of it. Therefore, a non-vote is like a no. So 2/3 must affirmatively approve it. It was about 481 yeses in total. Right, right. In other words, you have 720 homes. We need 2/3 of that. Yes, the document will be presented as one document. Yeah.
You have the red-lined version, which shows all the changes. That is the document. And it would take 481 people, 481 units to approve that. There's 1 vote for each unit. Doesn't matter how many people live in the unit. No, they're absentee ballots. You're going to get a ballot in the mail. The ballot can be brought in here, dropped off. You do not have to be here in person. It's going to come out in the mail it's all according to the regulations of how we have to send it out. So if we sent it out now, it would be too early because the vote is going to be August 24th. So it has to go out in the timeline that's specified in the current bylaws. Yes, that's why we're having an open meeting, and anybody who wants to ask a question can ask a question at this time.
I know you haven't started with the bylaws yet, but there is a provision in the red line section that says, if I'm not mistaken, that 1 person can sign a check up to $100,000. Is that correct?
We just went through this.
Did you go through it? That is the most absurd thing I have ever heard. Nobody should be allowed to sign a check to be required 2 signatures a minimum between $10,000 and $15,000. If you heard it already, fine.
You know, in reference to the check signing, I'm John Pinto, I'm Unit 544 Pacing Way. I'm still unclear. We say that you need 1 signature for a check up to 100,000. What happens when a contract is issued in excess of 100,000, and a lot of contracts call for a preliminary deposit of some percentage, then a second check when the material is shipped, for example, another check when all the permits. So you could have a contract that's 300, 400, 500,000, issuing multiple checks. So you could have checks under 100,000, but there may be more than one of them. Does that constitute a 2-signature requirement? Because I'm still unclear. No, they didn't answer.
Each time,
No.
Hi, I'm David Goldstein.
How are
The
you?
first part of the process is proposals come in. Proposals go to the full board, not only the 7 board members, but the presidents of each one of the condo associations, and the proposals are voted on at a meeting. So there's no checks, no invoices or anything until a proposal is approved and voted on.
We understand that. That's
Okay.
very clear.
Okay, so then once it's voted on, and now it's time to start paying things, contractors submit an invoice to us. We scan it into a computer, it goes up onto the internet, and the first stop is it goes to Irene. Irene logs onto her computer, checks the invoice, makes sure everything's right, that right amounts is paid, the work was performed, and when she's satisfied that it's being done correctly, she signs off electronically. It then gets pushed along to board members. So the first board member gets it, opens it up.
That's all perfectly clear. What I'm asking you is if a contract is in excess of 100,000 and there's multiple checks being sent, does it require 2 signatures because it's over 100,000 in total? That's what the woman asked. I didn't hear an answer.
Well, I'm explaining the process.
No, I understand the process.
Okay, so
but there's still multiple checks
if
on a single
I'm-
contract.
I don't know, you should tell what you approved on.
The simple answer to your question is yes. If we want to get around it, it probably can be done. It wasn't intended that way, but the way it's worded, it can be done.
That's really not acceptable.
Talk about the back end so people know that you can't just write themselves.
no, we've explained the back end.
Okay, so it gets signed off on, and when I say it gets signed off on, Irene signs it off first, then it goes to Rick. Rick signs off on it, then the next person signs off on it. Once all the approvals are made, then we can cut the check. Until those approvals are made, I won't even see the invoice as something that's available to be paid. Period, end of sentence. It just doesn't get there until all the approvals are done. And something else that's important, every check that's issued, on a monthly basis, we give out financial reports to the entire board and the board presidents of the condominiums. Everybody gets 8 sets of books a month, the HOAs and each one of the condos. And every check, every bill is in there to be seen. It's very transparent, at least to everybody who's on the board. It's right there.
And then, after that gets to the board, there's a finance committee meeting once a month, and the people on the finance committee, some of them who are here, go through every single check and question every single check, and what's it for, and is it going to the right account? Make sure that the right accounts have been charged for it. So that's another 8 or 9 people. So now we've got probably close to 20 people who have looked at every single check that's been issued here every month.
Somehow, it appears to me that you've got triple check, not double check. You don't have 2 people signing a check. You've got Irene in the office that's signing off on it, you've got the board signing off on it, and then you got them signing off on it. So you don't have one person writing a check for $80,000 or 14 checks for $80,000 apiece and getting away with murder. You've got triple checks already.
And not only that, if I may say something else, as was just stated just a second ago, the Finance Committee checks the books once a month and checks the status of the outgoing expenditures, the checks, the actual checks. So if you look at the Finance Committee as auditors, they audit the books once a month. So I don't know what more we can do.
Just a point of order. When we get a contract for $1 million, the fellow that has doing the work has to be paid every month sometimes according to what the contract is. So we'll pay him $100,000. There is a balance on the book for $900,000. It's not like people are just going to write checks. So it is very accurate. It's all computerized. And he gets paid as we go along. The landscaper, I'm pretty sure he just can get paid, whatever it is, $50,000 for the year. He may pay monthly, and if he wants more money than the original contract, then I have to go back to the board for an approval and go through the same sequence of events. So now, just to make sure that we understand, I run a big company with the government. I signed check for $200,000. Sometimes I write a check for $500,000. I have no problem because it goes through that system. It goes to the finance people. They looked at them. They look at the entire contract. They do it 3 times. They see a difference. They'll come back to my people. They'll come back to me. But we are not going, nobody really writes, nobody. There's exceptions to everything. But nobody writes checks like, I get the invoice, let me write your check. No, that's like 5 and 10 kind of situation. No, this is like a corporation to do that.
Hi, I have a very simple question, really. If we have this system, why was this put in? Why was this change put in, since it's such a great system to start?
The current bylaws don't have a limit on the checking, and this was put in just to make sure that at a certain level there is a second check or second checks and balances. And I find it interesting that we're focusing on this when we're basically saying someone elected to the board is going to wind up stealing a check or paying out more. It really is a very, very carefully programmed process in order to get that.
I don't think people I don't think people are saying that, you know, they suspect that people are going to steal. Look, the people who are on the board are doing it as volunteers. They act in a fiduciary capacity. I'm not going to say that someone is going to do something nefarious, but it's my belief that these controls, including the audit once a month, is sufficient to protect us. And the $100,000 is an added layer of protection.
The people in the people
I'm
streaming
coming.
can't hear you.
I'm coming.
The only reason there's any question right now, if people have read the papers lately, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but nobody thought it was going to happen at the Hebrew Academy either. That's why people are asking.
You're right.
You know, typically, when you read the story in the newspapers, like the Hebrew Academy, right, the problem is their books haven't been audited. They don't have the kind of checks and balances that we have. So quite often, you'll see the bookkeeper in a company was writing herself checks to her own secret accounts or her own private company. That ain't going to happen here because every single check gets looked at 10 ways and sideways. It's not going to happen because everything is constantly being looked at and constantly being audited. There's no way I could get my hands on a checkbook and me and David decide to go to hit the Caribbean and go to the casinos by writing ourselves checks. Right. It's not going to happen because of the amount of controls and layers that we have where everything is being checked and then double checked and then audited after the fact.
There are over 20 people who look at every single check that goes out.
Hello? I have one question pertaining to what we're talking about right here. Rick stated before that he has never signed a check. So going backward to what it says in the bylaws that haven't been changed yet, where it says the president and the secretary must sign those checks, if he has never signed a check before, then that means they do what they want to do, and there's no checks and balances with the 7 people checking it and whatever. How are we changing it to 1 if it's only been 1? He's never signed a check. He told us that.
Okay, Section 7 says, may be signed by the president, the treasurer, or any other such person or persons as the board of directors may from time to time designate, and we have done the designation. I just read it.
But what I read, when he just told us where it was, it says president and treasurer.
But keep reading. Keep going on. Or designated. Board designated.
So it means we have no checks and balances. Anybody can sign a check.
The board has designated David Goldstein to sign the check. And we have definitely a check and balance. There are 20 people every month who are looking at every single check that goes out.
So what's the gain? What was the purpose?
There's no gain.
Changing it from what was to what you're changing it now. What is your purpose? What is your reason for changing it? If it was good for the last 15 years, why are you trying to change it now? What's your purpose?
Because the $100,000 was not in there before.
Which means it was needed for every check?
It means there was no limit on a check. Now, $100,000 is a limit that's been placed on it. So before, anybody could write a check for $10 million. Well, now...
As long as it was approved by all the people online, right?
Yes. We go through a process to approve the checks, and the checks get approved before they're cut, and after they're cut, it gets audited. Once a month, we have the meeting, and the people on the Finance Committee go through every line on every one of the pages. We get a 62-page report every month, and based on that, everybody on the Finance Committee is okay with every check that's written. If they're not okay with a check, and most of what we find sometimes is a check's been put into the wrong account. So we do is we adjust the account so that by the end of the year, we're charging the right accounts.
Okay, so I have one last question. With all these bylaw changes, many of them are all in one group, affecting removal of the sponsor's name, the builder's name, whatever you want to call it, and other ones are for specific things. Why couldn't we have a set of bylaw changes sent to us that we can approve individually or in the group of the big one and then another one and another one, as opposed to either we sign for everything or nothing, which is what happened last time, and then it doesn't happen. Because if there's one thing in there we don't want to approve, nothing gets approved.
The bylaws themselves are an integral part of everything we do here. That to segregate pieces will require 4 or 5 different ballots, will require a lot of extra work, and very frankly, we would like all of this approved the way it is, and we believe we worked very, very hard to make this thing work for everybody. And if, you know, and especially the one we're talking about now, we probably never would have segregated the thing on signing checks, because I guess we never anticipated this kind of reaction to it. So how many do we separate? 50, 40, 30, 20? No, then you're going to have 10 ballots or 12 ballots or 15 ballots.
Or one ballot with 10 different check boxes.
No. You're going to have all those choices. So the answer is, it sounds...
We're entitled to those choices.
It sounds very, very nice to do it. The difficulty is very difficult, and this is a complete package because the items in there tie into each other to some extent.
To some extent. There's the vast majority of them involve removing the sponsor's name, right?
The vast majority of the text, not necessarily the vast majority of what's important.
Okay, so if there are a few other groups, it's going to be that impossible to have us be able to vote separately on those things? I can't understand that part. You say it's going to be complicated, it's going to be harder, but so it's a little harder, but it's going to be more specific. We can get a better choice of votes. It's either all or nothing.
Correct.
I don't agree with that. And I think a lot of people are not going to vote, and you're going to have trouble passing.
It's my understanding that the last time that we tried to adopt these rules, it failed because an insufficient number of people voted. Is that correct? Okay, so an insufficient number of people voted. So exponentially, add on all of these layers of different facets of these bylaws and vote on each one. I think statistically, the number of people who will vote will go down, 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 and down. And as a result, it'll be interminable. These bylaws will not pass, and some of these provisions are extremely important, like one having to do with the sponsor. And I'll read it to you. And this is really jarring to me. And we're taking it out. And it has to do, let me see, give me a second. Okay. The developer, it's page 4, right before Article 6. The developer shall have the right, on an equal basis with other members, to use all or any of the common areas or permit all or any of the common areas to be used by the developer's designee or any prospective purchaser of a home or any tenants of unsold homes without charge, in accordance with and subject to these bylaws and any rules and regulations promulgated by the board. So I think that means that Mr. Dubb can allow both himself and his nieces and nephews and siblings to use this place, use the tennis courts, the pool, and all the common facilities. So, well, he can still do it. He can still do it, except that these bylaws strike it to make it impossible for him to do it. So this protects us against the developer. That's the whole point of getting rid of this. So by voting piecemeal, it'll be interminable, and I really do think that the number of votes will go down every time we try to vote on these.
My name's Arnie Elizer. I'm in for 453 Pacing Way. I have a silly question which harks back to my days as a software developer. What would happen if someone who wanted to steal money could duplicate the check you use? And would there be anything that could be done, for instance, at the bank level? What?
Oh. Okay, I'm sorry. What I was thinking is, what would happen if someone, someone forged a check? Could be very easily done these days. And is there like any stopgap at the bank that when a check is presented to it, that it could maybe be encoded or something like that, so that the bank could say, hey, this is a fraudulent check, as opposed to, all the other pieces of the puzzle that you have described?
We have Fidelity Insurance to cover this. We have insurance. We're covered by insurance on this matter.
The main bank we use is Signature Bank for the day-to-day checking, and Signature Bank will call my office every time a check goes in there that they're uncomfortable with. Maybe my signature looks a little funny, they don't recognize a payee or something, they will call us and check us. If, though, a check were to get forged, and it happens, because it is very easy today, if somebody were to get the bank account number on it and forge a check and sign a check and pay it, that forgery won't even come back to us in terms of we have to kick in our insurance. It's the bank's responsibility to make sure the check is good. If a forged check gets paid by them, it's their problem, and we're going to get the money from the bank, and the bank has to try to recover it from wherever they can.
Okay, Rayla Bloom, 464 Pacing. I think you have heard a lot of objections to the statement about the $100,000, and I'm wondering if maybe you would reconsider and either take it out or redo it before it's time to vote. In other words, to ensure that you're going to get this passed, because a lot of people are very, very upset about the single signature. Even though you've explained it, it's written one way, and the people are upset, and we'd like to pass the bylaws, but we'd like you to reconsider that.
The answer is, I think we may have to. Never, and I said it before, did I expect this paragraph to create such a furor. And I guess the reason is because we up here know the process and maybe didn't give it as much thought as you people are doing. So I think we do have to look at it and put the word "and" back in, but I don't know the answer is I can't answer for the board, but I can tell you my reaction. I was really surprised that this is such an item, and I think we do have to look at it.
I would like to deal with the reality. We have never had a vote here which came close to 2/3. So we're all sitting around, reading the changes, talking about $100,000, whatever. And what's the likelihood that we're going to get 2/3 of people voting to change the bylaws?
A few years ago, we had a few bylaw amendments that passed with the 2/3 vote. Several years ago, 2016, we amended the bylaws and with the 2/3 vote.
An expectation that we're going to be able to achieve that again?
If we're following the rules, we have no choice. We have to go. We wanted to change the bylaws, and we did it in 2016, and now we're trying to do it again.
And very frankly, we're hoping by this candid discussion that even if you have some thoughts about one item, you'll realize that the document itself is critically important. We need to get it passed. There are things in there such as I stated before, silly things that may hurt us where we bar open houses. We give the board the right to enforce things. We give the board the right to implement rules and regulations, things that are really desperately needed that we've realized that is lacking, and that's why it's a package. They all go together. Separating them, you wouldn't understand sometimes that one ties into the other. So again, yes, it's going to be a difficult uphill climb, We're trying to be as open and as clear and concise as we can, hoping that we will, I shouldn't say convince you, but I really do mean it, that we need to implement these things. And we're hoping when the ballots come out, you'll turn out and vote that yes, because if you don't vote, it's a no.
I have a question back to everyone that's asked this question. Before this, it said "and," president and treasurer, which means they both could be crooked and sign the check. I don't know why that's the issue. But it wasn't $100,000 before. It was unlimited. They've kind of limited to $100,000. So I'm not sure that we can change it, but why would you not want it at $100,000? That protects us even more. And they're asking us to take that out. I'm listening to all of this, and I'm not sure it makes sense. Do you all understand? We never see a checkbook. The checks are all done by TCM. He has the checkbooks. We don't sign them. We don't do anything. We don't own a checkbook. So I'm not sure what we could steal, but I guess everyone has their own opinion.
Okay, at the conclusion of the meeting, we will have a meeting to discuss this particular item. And then after the Bylaws Committee does it, it has to go to the Board of Directors.
And they're meeting tomorrow. So we hear you.
I have a question for the board.
We hear you about this $100,000 issue. Clearly, it's something that is important to everyone. And excuse me? Yes, and that's part of the discussion that we're going to have this evening. The board is going to meet tomorrow regarding any possible change. Most probably we will change it.
A question for you guys. If you decide to make a change, will there be another informational meeting before the voting date? Or will you postpone the voting date? How will it actually work going forward?
Why don't we do this? Why don't we decide now?
Let's talk about it, because we've got to worry about the language. We'll tell them if we're making a change, we'll notify them of the change. We're not having another meeting.
How do we do it? How do we notify you?
You send an email.
We're going to send it. We'll send a mail.
Okay.
If the committee meets and has a change, you would have to be notified of it before the mailing goes out. So you would be notified 100% of any changes that are made.
Is it possible to separate all of the former sponsors' articles and do a separate thing with that?
No.
Why not?
Because the committee met, we decided that we were presenting it like this, and we're here to listen to any objections.
I don't think you would get a lot of people opposing that, though.
I don't want to beat a dead horse to death, but the question I have is when I read the Section 7, it says, all checks or demands for money and notes of the association shall be signed by the president, this is the existing, and treasurer. Then it goes on to say, or by such other officer. So in a sense, you're saying if it's two board members, it's the president and the treasurer, but now you can delegate it to one person, because that's what the current bylaws say. Is that correct?
So if the current bylaws say that, we were trying to make this more
No,
restrictive.
I'm just asking you about the current bylaws.
The answer is yes.
So in other words, what we have here currently is that if it's a board, the treasurer and the president have to sign it, but you could delegate it to one person. Is that correct?
Correct.
So why don't you just easily make it that two board members or two signatures? I think it's wrong to just have one signature, even on the current bylaws, which you can do. But I'd like to see the board consider the fact that there are many individuals who will be voting, and if you need every damn vote in this community to get it passed, I think you should look very hard in changing what you're proposing.
I want to go back to what you were saying on page 4, because I had heard that our developer, well, Beechwood Homes, where they're doing a lot of building on Merrick Avenue. In fact, they're calling one of their developments Meadowbrook Point of East Meadow. And I had heard something that they're going to have those residents allowed to come to our facility, let's say to use our indoor pool, or things that they don't have in their community. Is there any truth to that?
No, there is absolutely no truth to that. When Beechwood retained the name of Meadowbrook Point, they can use that in any of their myriad of developments that they have. But they can't call it, we're Meadowbrook Point, they're Meadowbrook Point of East Meadow. It's a different corporation. And nobody else who has any right to come in here to use the facilities unless we grant them right.
Hi, my name's Len Masucci. In keeping with that gentleman over there said, we went through this the last time, we could not get enough signatures. If each and every one of us speaks to every person in their building or in their neighborhood, we can get this through. But if we don't, we won't.
Thank you.
Hi, Seth Grenitz, Condo 6. So it seems to me to leave the proposal as it is like the wills that we all had when we had our first kid, and we made sure we decided who was going to take care of them. I joked with my kids at one point, and they were maybe 40 or so, and I said, okay, you know, Uncle Charlie's not going to take care of you anymore. So to me, it seems first things first. This isn't the last time we're going to ever get to change anything, and it's more important to not have the wills we had when our first kid was born. That's what I think.
Thank you.
You know, there's an expression in legislation, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And just because there may be one or two sections that you disagree with, that shouldn't be a reason to defeat the whole thing. If you believe that the majority of the changes are positive, the open meetings, things like that, you should vote yes, even if there are one or two sections that you may feel are not perfect.
Linda Wiltsey, Building 53. I just have a couple of comments to make. This thing about page 4, the paragraph that you took out, I noticed on it that says a provision regarding development may not be amended without the written consent of the developer. So I'm wondering how you could take that out. And my second comment is about the change in the condominium bylaws. I was upset to see that you combined all the changes that were needed along with the change in the rental from 4 months to 1 year, because people like me don't agree with that, and there are other people who don't agree with it. There may be reasons why someone needs to rent for a shorter period of time, and I don't think it's right to take that option away, considering how expensive it is to own a unit here. So I thought that should have been definitely a separate vote and not included with the rest of it.
To answer your first question, the developer signed off when he left the facility here, and we have the right to take him out. So that's the purpose, one of the purposes of doing this. Secondly, the 7 board of managers met and they had a lot of proposals before them, and they got together and decided that it was in the best interest of all the 7 condos to have a 12-month minimal lease.
Right, Linda, Rick, let me just follow up what Rick said, that the Board of Managers and the 7 condos, as you probably noticed in the amendment they're proposing, wanted these type of provisions. And the board and the committee went along with that and felt that we had a dovetail to bolster what the condos themselves want to do. And that's why it's in here, to prevent a conflict. No, but Linda, a separate item would have been a problem because we shouldn't have something different than the condos. That's the issue. That's why we can't separate so many things, and it has to be a block, because if we didn't explain why it's in here, someone would say, wait a minute, that's enough to turn it down, and then we're going to have a conflict between our bylaws and theirs, and that would be something we prefer not to do.
I'd like to add to that. It's not something that the condo presidents decided among themselves. There was a petition circulated through the community, and long before we decided to do bylaws. And the petition said people wanted to change to 1 year. So we went through that, and we also, you'll notice it says you have to own for 1 year before you can rent. There were other suggestions made, but we shot them down. We want to keep it simple, just get to the point of getting 1 year. And it's not our choice, it was the community say.
Changing the rental rules to 1 year was first presented by a good friend of mine who felt that there were too many people using this as a transient residence. And she was told by the board that you'll never get it done this way, and she got it done. So I want to thank Susan Latman for presenting this to the board and getting such a wonderful response.
Any further questions? Raise your hand high. Going once, going twice.
Thank you very much. The committee will meet to discuss what's been said tonight.